super professional podcast has started. All right, I've got the chat up. I can better mute this so that it doesn't. Oh yeah, if you're watching the watch page, Stefan, David, and Seth, you just remember to mute it because you'll get some feedback. So cool. On that note, welcome to episode 5 of the Absolute AppSec podcast. We are joined. We have some special guests, David Coursey and Stefan Edwards. So I'm going to give a little bit of an intro, or at least try to, and then they can talk about themselves. Seth and I have known Stefan and Coursey for years now. Stefan, huge programming language theory nerd. I think during this podcast, you'll probably see why most of us end up Googling the stuff that Stefan talks about. Because he knows a lot of obscure random things about. Yeah.
He's the reason Google exists. Let's just, at least for the geeks.
Exactly. And David Coursey, I've worked with, we both work with Stefan and David Coursey. David Coursey's I know Go's your kind of the language you're gravitating towards now, or at least I believe that's true.
Yeah, that's definitely still true.
Awesome. And you did a talk at a developer conference. I'm trying to remember what the name of that developer conference was.
It was SyntaxCon in Charleston, and then I had done B-Sides Augusta a couple times and some other small ones.
And I know Stefan, you had spoken, I believe it was, so you did this InfoSec Eeyore talk. I know you did it overseas, but you did it at was it DerbyCon or was it somewhere else?
So I gave InfoSec Eeyore at GERCon in 2015. Last year I gave on being a type-heavy scheme programmer in InfoSec at Curian, which was in Barcelona.
So go Google that, because that
it was
all the InfoSec peeps. You can go Google it now, right? Or pause and then Google and come back. Justin, I'm looking at you.
Yeah, I mean, so I gave that talk there. I gave a few talks last year. I don't know, but most of them were on programming language theory, formal verification. I talked about F-star and formal verification in InfoSec at CactusCon. So, probably my most successful talks.
Actually, what was that? You got into it on Twitter. Well, you had a little back and forth on Twitter, but what was I can't remember the language. It was or Solidity and
Ethereum.
And Ethereum, yes.
Yeah, so I was criticizing Solidity for having weird semantics and not actually. So there's an underflow overflow problem with the type infrastructure within Solidity itself. So basically, Solidity tries to guess the types of things based on the operations you're doing and whatnot. And it's very easy to create something very small that overflows to a 200 Solidity. It's been working on that. The main developer behind it has been working on that. But when I criticized it on Twitter, it blew up a little, and Vitalik Buterin, who is the person who actually wrote Ethereum, he and Chris ETH, or whatever his handle is, both jumped in there and were a little unhappy with that criticism. So it was neat. I mean, it was neat to see, but
it was neat to watch.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's not the first time that I've caused some controversy with my language opinions and stuff on Twitter. So,
Well, maybe we'll get into some language opinions tonight then, right? Because I know, between the four of us, I mean, we could probably ignore Java and .NET, right, and C#, but we've got quite a bit of experience, especially with the new hipster languages or the old hipster languages, right? And we could talk about Pascal or Progress or some of the old But we probably don't want to make people Google too much. But it may be interesting to talk about kind of the advantages and disadvantages that you see, like in the languages that you're currently working in. But we'll get into that. I mean, it's not necessarily on the list, but it may be a good one to talk through. I don't know, Ken. What are you thinking?
There is no list. Ignore the list. There's whatever you guys want. And honestly, like you'll see. David Coursey and Stefan are what I like to call the masters of shit posting. So when it comes to humor, and you're not going to see on this podcast tonight probably a lot of mature humor. That's the way we want it to be. So whatevs. You know.
Wait, what did I sign up for here?
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, every time I give a talk, I don't have a lot or as much to bring to the table as someone like Stefan. So I judge my success based on if my jokes deliver well. So if I get good laughs from the audience, I walk away completely happy.
I mean, I have the opposite issue, right? Like until Curry on, most of the time my talks, I'm happy if people are not comatose by like the third minute, or if they're like, if the math slides start to come out and people are not like jumping away from the talk already, like getting up, oh, fuck this, I'm out, man. There's math in this talk. Like I'm not doing anything with this. So.
Yeah, when you show too much code, half the audience gets up and leaves. That's not a good thing.
No, especially because my talks are usually, until Curry on, like my talks were usually not super packed to begin with anyway. So if I lose half my audience, it's like 3 or more people leave. Like it's a lot.
Yeah.
I did one for a local Charleston ISSA just on SQL injection attacks and defenses. And it says something about the state of the industry and the average talks that people see, because I made a joke slide where I said, okay, we're going to go over the SQL query. And I just went on Google and found the biggest query I could find and crammed it with 6-point font onto the slide so it was packed. And I said, we're going to go over this query. Nobody said anything. Nobody laughed. They just kind of looked. I'm like, crickets. All right, we're going to move on.
See, I think that's a lot funnier than like putting memes or something into your PowerPoint presentation. I mean, the actual delivery being something so subtle like that is like, for me, that's far more entertaining than forced laughter via some meme I've seen 1,000 times. So
right, yeah.
Cool.
What were we talking about? I don't know.
I don't know.
Something. Doesn't matter.
Whatever.
We're on bullet point number 1, the lack of a list.
There we go. Bullet point number 1. That we should come up with a list next time before we start. Is that what we're thinking?
Some sort of structure.
Where's that?
What's that?
All right. Let's start with autosploit then, right? I don't know if I'm the best person to give an introduction on it, right? But let's go, Dave. David, what do you think?
All right.
What is autosploit, first of all?
So I haven't actually attempted to use it, but from my understanding, it's a Python script that scans Shodan and can take the Shodan results for whatever latest vulnerability is and automatically attack those IP addresses where Shodan found it. And so pretty much point and click, people throw out the script kiddie word, point and click hacking. That's my understanding.
Yeah. And that's Metasploit, well, for years they had Autopwn, right? They kind of removed that because they didn't, I think it was because they went commercial and Rapid7 actually bought them out, right? And they wanted to create a commercial version. But it's kind of the same idea from my understanding as well, from looking at it, right? Is, hey, instead of using Nessus or something else that you're scanning the network from, or Nmap, it's actually using Shodan and saying what's available that's exploitable, and then run that exploit against.
Exactly.
Yeah, it just feeds it right into Metasploit, right? Like there's no filtering, there's no nothing. There's a bunch of hard-coded text files. I mean, it's really not anything all that amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It
So
looked like
what's the big deal about it, right then? In that case, Stefan, why is everybody up in arms about a new security tool?
I mean, we like to get our dicks in a twist about stuff, right? Like that's literally what we do all the time. I mean, come on, right?
That's what Twitter's about?
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
So much.
I mean, what else are we doing this for, right? Like, no, I mean, honestly, it's an interesting concept. I think it's more of a, I don't want to say like an art piece or something like that, but I mean, it basically brings knowledge to the fact that these things are very easy to connect together. The work that was actually done, the works that were actually done for it are really, it's just a bunch of glue code. It's not even anything all that interesting. There's a bunch of problems with the code there. I'm sure
it's not that much code.
No, it's not even that much code, right? And it's funny that something so simple can get the entire internet up in arms and make people like basically take sides as to whether or not this is good, when actually it's just a bunch of like shitty Python, slung together to just pwn something, kind of, maybe. Just throw it in the Metasploit. I mean,
it's basically a Python script to take about 4 clicks and commands out of the Metasploit Hail Mary, right? So
kind of.
you don't actually have to set those up yourself. You just click.
Right. Out of a Shodan search. So, I mean, it's like
Yeah.
you get your OSINT together and you do a bunch of stuff on Shodan, and then it just puts it into Metasploit for you. So you don't have to remember which side is L host and which side is R host, and then you're done. But if you look at that code, like I posted in one of the Slacks that we're all in, and it looks like if the host returns unfiltered output, that is like rm-rf, it's going to be put right into that os.system call and just going to be run as root right from autosploit. So, I mean, it's not great code. It really isn't.
No, I mean, I even just scanning it right now. And I mean, for those of you that haven't followed us before, we all do source code review, we do development. And so digging into code is kind of what we do. But I mean, I'm seeing the OS system. I mean, most of the code seems to be boilerplate actually for display in a command in a terminal, right?
Got that classy ass magenta.
Yeah, magenta and other colors, right? Like,
yeah, so
really, not red. Yeah, it's like he spent more time doing that than actually gluing. Yeah, Showdown to Metasploit, at least from what I can see.
And why the pickle serialization for the API key?
Because you want a VM in your VM, just so you can VM while you're VMing.
Yo, dog.
Makes no sense.
No, actually, so it's line 134 that I was looking at, that template there. So the R hosts are pulled from that host list, which is a hard-coded text file, which is awful in and of itself, right? But if you put anything in that host file that is from an untrusted source, it's just literally going to get stuck into a pseudo pipeline that's for running Metasploit right there. So if you put like an apostrophe, a semicolon, a space, an rm-rf/, and then, like a crunch, the rest of the line will be commented out. It'll erase disk as root and just continue. I mean, it's stupid. Or not as root, because you would be breaking out of the pseudo there. I guess you could leave it in the single apostrophe there. But I mean, yeah, it's not great code. It really is.
So that sounds like a good research topic, preceding Shodan with
malicious stuff,
harmful commands for autosploit.
To take advantage of autosploit. So hunting autosploiters?
Yeah. I mean, that's similar than the Cobalt Strike RCE that was just found.
Is that how that one actually worked as well? Something similar?
Yeah, I don't want to open up Slack right now. But yeah, there was I think it was a Cobalt Strike server RCE, like a login bypass, so that you could attack the pen testers essentially.
Andrew Wilson has talked about this for years, about like, I don't know if he actually ever produced any research, but he said he wanted to. He works over at Bishop Fox. But yeah,
he too. But yeah,
Yeah, he founded Cactus Con, but he wanted to do research on just like how vulnerable security tools are, because they are. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Because it's
Because it's a lot
code.
of glue code.
Yeah, it's a lot of glue code. Yeah, I mean, and like this code here, and I'm by the way trying to look up the Cobalt Strike thing, but
Okay, it wasn't a RCE. It was an easy password brute force done by Ryan O'Horo.
Yeah, Ryan O'Hara had just released the he just released that tool as well.
Yes, Brooder.
Awesome. I am going to put that into the live chat. Yeah, cool. And then I'll put that on the description, as always, of this video, these links.
So can we add that to Autosploiter? And
I mean, the code is an awesome side project. For an awesome side project, meaning something that it was awesome for them to do that to learn. But in terms of the code, like it's just crazy that, I mean, here's how this goes, right? I mean, we've all seen the marketing flow. So what happens is you have these, you might have this marketing person that you pay money to, who then pays money to other places to get you on, as a quoted source for news outlets, for even shitty sites that just are like local to whatever state or region. It doesn't matter. The whole game is to get your SEO up on your site, right? To get your name out there to drive traffic. So then what ends up happening is the marketing person gets X amount of inquiries for quotes. And then that person, whether it's a marketing person or it's like, one of these people's publicist or whatever it is, so they're like, oh, we need a response on this thing by like, and it's always within like an hour or something, right? Because this story has to break. And that's really how this stupid circus of like InfoSec drama occurs, or it's like one pretty prevalent route of how this all occurs, is just because, like, to get names out there to make money, people have to, within a certain time frame, be a trusted quoted source and comment on stupid bullshit, when in reality you probably should have just said, this isn't worth my time, like, move on to the next thing. Is this a slow news day? That's my take.
Yeah, and then that's exactly what happened with Autosploiter, right? For some reason it got picked up, and then everyone started commenting on it, and for lack of a better term, kind of the mainstream news outlets all picked it up, that there was this new exploit that was making it easy for people to hack all the things, right? And it blew up there for a little while, for like a day, right? Even though
Rob Joyce commented on it on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, I mean, how many tools are there out there that are similar to this that we know about or that we've seen over the years that haven't gotten anywhere near that publicity? So just because it's called Autosploit, I mean, I don't understand. It just
logo, cool name.
Yeah. I also don't understand why this exploded like wildfire, because anybody who's done any pen testing for more than 15 minutes understands that A, you don't need it, and B, it's probably more work than it's worth. And it's easier just to go to Shodan yourself and, find what you're looking for and use any number of tools to do the exact same thing. And then you don't have to worry about shit flying everywhere and things auto blowing up and exploits just hitting the wrong targets. Know what you're doing and have a little bit more faith in your skills to focus your target.
Well, isn't there a Metasploit gather for Shodan anyway? I thought there was. I thought there already, like, from a while ago too, not just.
Yeah.
So why would you, if you're going to use Metasploit to begin with, why wouldn't you just use that gather to, like, actually collect stuff instead of some hacky piece of shit script with hard-coded host files?
Yeah, there's a Shodan search gather in auxiliary. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's even that revolutionary. It's just it kind of blew up there.
Yeah, but does it do it in magenta?
No,
I mean, come on, man. It's like this is very silly. Like,
it is fun to talk about in case anyone's like, well, why are you talking about it if, people,
Yeah.
I mean, because screw it. Because it's fun to talk about nonsense blowing up.
We stare at code all day and we need some drama to spice up our lives.
yeah.
Don't judge us.
Whoever is beside CHS, that's exactly it. Like when Baitlich responded there, that killed it. That really made it blow up when people poo-pooed it initially for no reason whatsoever. Like it's a dumb idea, yes, and it just connects a bunch of stuff. But as soon as someone gets on there and says like, "Oh, this is what did he even say? Was it a cyber weapon or something like this?" Like it was scare quotes. I have to look it up now.
Yeah,
cyber weepon. Man,
I do too.
We need to get into that sweet defense money and develop some cyber weapons then. Right?
200 lines of Python, $10 million.
One line of Perl.
Yeah, of course.
One line of Perl that 3 people can understand.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's
and
what makes it so
understand it if you come back to it, 2 hours later either.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no legitimate reason to put mass exploitation of public systems within the reach of script kiddies. Just because you can do something doesn't make it wise to do so. Like, come on, man.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
I mean, it's such posturing. Like, I mean, talk about masturbatory posturing. Like, if the number of like mass exploitation scripts for script kiddies look at Loic and look at all those like shitty tools from long ago. Like, are we going to, clutch pearls and get really upset about those for no reason as well? It's just, I don't know.
I will say this. Well, I don't know. This was kind of a long. This was so. How do you say his last name?
Baitlich.
That's what I'm saying.
All right. Well, I mean the articles. So it's on Vice. So, because normally I'm kind of trying to read through this because normally what I will say what they normally do though. Okay, well he put it on Twitter. Hold on.
Yeah, that's where I grabbed it from. Yeah.
Okay, well never mind. I was gonna say, well, hey, you normally write like 3 or 4 paragraphs, and to in response to these media inquiries, and then they dissect it for what they want to put out there. But in this case, it's like, no, this is just his Twitter feed. I'll even post a link to it. This is just his Twitter feed. That was there was no additional context to take into account. That was just it. Like, this is really bad.
I mean,
it's interesting to talk to the author, right? Because I'm sure he was writing this as an exercise and like, oh, this could be useful. And all of a sudden it blows up. And I mean, realistically, he had like 500 Twitter followers and just happened to get picked up, right? Yeah. I'm sure he feels a little hard done by the whole thing, right?
I mean, it's a fun side project, but it's just
fun for Ken to bag on people.
I wish my crappy side projects got this much publicity.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. That's a double-edged sword. Be careful from what you wish for. I'm gonna go find some of your worst code and then make a.
You won't have to look hard.
That's all of his code.
This is gonna break all our cybers. There's no reason for this.
Cyber warfare.
This senseless.
Senseless acts of digital violence.
There you go.
It is funny that Baitlich has a quote from Ulysses S. Grant as his Twitter bio that begins with "The art of war is simple enough." So it's like, I mean, I'm not trying to judge. I guess I could have like some cheesy Sun Tzu like quote as mine, but I don't know. It just seems like one of those people who would get all up in arms about something being, a weapon of mass destruction when it's really not.
Especially considering his background and where he's worked, right? Like the people who've worked for Mannion and FireEye have put out tons of tools that are cyber weapons.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and why didn't, right, the most recently from Metasploit, speaking of which, right, all the eternal NSA exploits that they find, that whoever just posted all the exploits for, now they work for basically every vulnerable version of Windows, right? That to me seems like a bigger deal than,
Yeah.
right? I mean, giving us the ability to do that, because we've all run into that problem before. I mean, I don't know how much pen testing you guys have done recently, but being in an environment and, oh crap, this Metasploit module only works against, Windows 2008 R2 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Having a reliable exploit like that, and obviously the NSA has for a while, but having a reliable exploit is probably more dangerous and more noteworthy than a tool that just binds together, source to exploit.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, the autosploit thing, and we've beaten it to death now, just makes it slightly faster than doing it yourself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's even other tools on Kali that you could use to do the same thing. Right? Yeah. What is it, Armitage, or some of those others that are there?
Is Armitage actually, out of curiosity, I was looking at that recently. Is Armitage still under development, or is it like all Cobalt Strike focused now? I gotta look at that, because I don't think I saw any development on Armitage since like 2016. Okay, so on GitHub, the last commit was to master was on July 8th, 2016.
Yeah. I mean, it's showing its age. It still works, but it's because it's Metasploit under the hood, right?
Yeah.
You just use it as an interface into Metasploit. Right. But if you want to just use the console, that works just as well. So
the only time I've ever really used Armitage was doing competitions as a red team person.
Yeah.
Where we had 12 people sharing shells and whatnot, so Armitage was the coordination engine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that makes more sense.
I think the problem with Armitage and developing for it is that it's written in sleep.
Written in what now?
Just make that up.
No, I did not.
We gotta all go Google that really quick.
I know. What now?
That's something.
No, Mudge actually made sleep. Sleep is a combination of Perl and like Objective-C or Self or Smalltalk, any of those sorts of languages. So Armitage itself is actually written in, or a large portion of Armitage and those sort of derived systems is actually written in sleep. And I think he did something similar for Cobalt Strike.
Yeah, you're right. Sleep.jar. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting.
Today I learned.
Right. And so it's a little more like as someone who's written, like I have 4 programming languages that I've written that are in production use or were in production use. And I had I was under no assumption that anyone was ever going to look at that code again and not just instantly replace it. So when I see things that are written in a very specific language like this, that is not necessarily the most widely used or similar to a widely used language anymore, it's not surprising that people don't jump in to fix stuff in Armitage, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier, right? From a complexity perspective and simplicity versus security perspective. I've been doing code reviews on some, kill me now, PHP enterprise frameworks, and the complexity there makes it so difficult. Unless you're somebody that's into one of those on a daily basis, the amount of spaghetti code that it becomes is extremely difficult. And I can only imagine, right, if you don't know what sleep is or how it actually functions, just to get up to speed to fix a problem would be extremely difficult. I mean, how many different contributors are there on Armitage? I mean, this could go to any security tool, right? I mean, I think most of us attempt to use something that's fairly common, whether that's Go or Python or Ruby, I guess, Ken.
Boo.
Oh gosh, we all hate Ruby. Ooh, I haven't heard that in fucking million times. I'm trying to actually see where the sleep code's being used, because so far I'm seeing a lot of Java, so that's why
there's an API. There's API calls in there that I see.
Yeah, a lot of the UI stuff is written in Sleep. And then for Cobalt Strike, he made a new version of Sleep called Cortana. And then
Oh yeah, I see it.
the later versions of Cobalt Strike.
So we're going to rename the podcast Code Reviews.
Yeah.
Do that.
Okay, so it's under this. Most of it's under the scripts directory.
Yeah.
Require authentication before using serialized objects to communicate. It's a good idea. Sorry, I'm reading the comments on some of these. Cool. Sorry,
But there
I just was curious where that was at. That's all.
Yeah, there are literally.
I mean, that does take us into languages a little bit, right? What were you going to say?
No, I was just gonna. I'm looking at this, and the code is just making me shake my head. But there's only 2 contributors to Armitage, and one person contributed 1 line.
Yeah. Yep. So it's like every other open source project that's out there, right?
Right.
Or 99.9% of them, whereas one person that builds something and then gets tired of it or gets paid to do something else, so he leaves it.
Yep.
Yeah, I just posted the logging script for Sleep.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it looks a lot kind of like there's almost kind of some Objective-C style,
Right.
calls and language parsing that's going on in there. It's interesting.
Well, Objective-C takes away from small talk and self, right? It adds that sort of objects or meta object protocol to C. Sleep combines that with Perl. Coursey is. I'm surprised you haven't fallen asleep yet, Coursey.
All I can say is totally.
Yeah. So there's 4 of us. So 2 of us have to get up and leave for Stefan to be quiet. Is that's what we need to do?
This is why my talks are not successful.
You're so smart.
Well,
So Ken, I did a Ruby assessment 2 weeks ago, and I don't hate it. Like, I know the jokes, we always beat you up over it. I don't hate it, but when I look at it, it just makes no sense to me. And I think that's because I started in C family languages and grew up through there. I spent most of my time when I was doing actual development in C#, and now I'm on Go. But when I look at Ruby, everything is backwards.
I've for the last couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, no, probably 2 weeks, I've been spending a decent amount of time with writing and reading Go. And so I've been looking at a lot of Go code, writing some Go code, and I will say this: Go code, reading that reminds me of how much easier other languages are, because Ruby is a pain in that. Oh, hold on. Ruby is a pain in that sense. To explain that a little bit better, the problem that a lot of people have is that when they start, you look at this line of code and you see this method, and then you're like, okay, what does that method do? And then you follow that method, and you're like, okay, it goes to this place, and then this place, it's don't understand, where's this defined? And you end up going down a rabbit hole because of the way that Ruby allows you to it's the style of writing Ruby, for one. And 2, things get defined on the fly at runtime fairly frequently. And so that's a confusing piece, the whole meta programming aspect to Ruby. So
I was looking for an authorization call for one specific function, and
I remember this.
I was going back to Stefan and one other guy on the team who's a Ruby expert, and I'm like, where does this thing get defined? Who has permissions to make this call? And he's like, well, it can be on the main application controller, or it could be anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that helps.
Yeah, because if you include a gem and you've got it in your gem file or you've got your gem file and gem file.lock of your app, and at that point, usually you have a file under your initialization directory, and if it's in there and it's initialized, you may not even realize what you're looking at and what's being called has been defined somewhere else. You need to open up a gem. You need to look inside the gem to figure out how that code works. And sometimes those gems, as is the case with OmniAuth related stuff and Devise, you're talking about multiple gems to figure out simple stuff like authentication. So it's And then that can be overridden within the application itself. So like, it's just, yeah, I understand why people don't enjoy it. I mean, looking at Go code for the last couple of weeks, I'm like, man, this is a lot easier. It's nicer.
Very succinct.
Yeah. Agreed. There's no magic.
Yeah. I mean, eventually you'll make your way to PHP and call it good. Is that what's going to happen, Ken?
Oh yeah, why not? PHP.
It's language for the masses. I love how we all just kind of sigh and then we move on.
You see, kids, once upon a time. What's that?
I'm actually sighing about Go more than PHP, but PHP is atrocious. Go is just sad to me.
It has its problems.
Go? Yeah. No, you know what the thing about Go is that I remember on 9fans when they were first talking about forking Limbo, which is the predecessor to Go, has a similar syntax. Back in my day. And I remember the discussions there, and Limbo fixes some of the problems that people have with Go, but they just went a different direction.
Yeah, forking Limbo. Forking Limbo, man. I think one of the things that was really weird in my career is I was a developer first, and then I got into systems engineering, and then 10 years later, I got back into coding and code security. And so I missed the whole revolution of generics. Generics were just introduced into C# when I was leaving that job, and I didn't look back. And so 10 years later, I came back and people are like, oh, well, Go doesn't have generics. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Like, stop saying that word.
That would make it a little easier, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. Like, you're generic, shut up.
Yeah.
Stop bagging on my language.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, when I heard people talking about concurrency in Go, I'm like, I'm probably 30 seconds into the conversation, I'm like, all right, I have no idea at all. I'm completely lost on what you're coming from a Ruby background, right? Like
functional, yeah.
Yeah, threading, what the fuck? Like concurrency. What do you need that for? Just have more hardware, right? That's how you fix that.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, I mean, along those lines, Dave, I mean, what is it that pushed you into Go, right? I mean, obviously you got back into security stuff and programming.
Yeah, honestly, I won't try to front at all. Like, I was watching stuff on Twitter, and Go was just like, getting lots of play as the cool new language, and it's really tightly coupled with like a lot of the container world. And when I did systems engineering, I was an early adopter of virtual machines, and I wouldn't say I've been an early adopter of containers, but I'm definitely adopting them. And so Go kind of felt like a natural choice.
Okay. I mean that makes sense. Usually you're, scratching some sort of itch. I wondered if it was just you wanted to be a hipster and that was the play. Right?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't even really know. Like, it wasn't until I had picked Go that I learned that there were, that it was like a hipster cool thing, and that, there was Rust and Ruby. Like, I just kind of said, all right, we got to do something. So let's pick this one.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you guys want to see me break Stefan's brain? Sure. Stefan, what's your favorite programming language?
I mean, right now,
too large.
I'm dabbling quite a bit with F* and Idris quite a bit. I'm working on Carmel, which is my own ML dialect. Do a lot of stuff with F#, OCaml, those sorts of things. Obviously, I'm much more into the very expressive type system functional programming language space than like the opposite side of where Go is going with a simpler language. I'm looking for a fairly simple
you're
language.
Very expressive.
Yeah, well, no. I mean, it's more because I'm curious about the expressive type system. I'm curious about what we can prove at compile time versus what we have to wait until runtime to actually use. So, interesting to see where F* is going and Idris and all those sorts of like higher typed, higher kinded languages are going. So
you sound like an Intel chip.
Did I lose everyone? Wow. Your face sounds like one.
We're not on Slack. I can't give you the dad joke emoji.
You're speculative. Good times. What's the Idris? I'm trying to find that one.
So Idris is a Haskell dialect that is dependently typed. So when you talk about dependent types, basically you're encoding other into the type itself. So for example, we're all used to having like integers, we're used to having arrays, but in a dependently typed language, you can say, I have an array of n elements, and I have another array of m elements. And I can enforce at the compiler level that m should always be greater than or equal to n at any given point in the program. So the program won't even compile if the destination array, let's say, is smaller. So you can avoid an entire class of programming language bugs at the compiler side just by proving things about your code. Does that make sense, Ken? You look like you're constipated.
Well, that's just my look.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm just.
It's fascinating. I just feel like it's a level above my capabilities.
Well, it's just.
Well, I think where it becomes that, like when I worked at Wicker, I tried using ATS, which is another dependently typed language, for some stuff, and it was like, guys, you'll never believe it. I was able to prove that the buffer I use to read in HTTP or SIP requests, I can prove that it's never longer than like 1,000. My coworkers were not impressed by this, but that was like days worth of work in order to get to that level. So,
well, who were you? That's the question then. Who were you working with at that point? I mean, did they just not? Was security not an issue, or was it just?
Or did you need to give a 4-hour prerequisite class?
I mean, it's that team. That team, like Wicker's entire backend at the time was PHP, believe it or not. So we were just experimenting. There was another really smart guy who worked with me there who was moving Wicker to Hack, which was interesting. Seeing all the stuff he was able to get from an incremental step from PHP to a slightly better language. He was doing really awesome work. I was experimenting on like greenfield stuff that would be, a little bit more interesting or a little bit different. But I mean, like ATS, it was extremely difficult and extremely verbose to get anything going. And when it was done, it felt like you had climbed a mountain. I mean, it was. Let me find some of these examples here.
So going back to the Idris or Idris, however I'm supposed to say it, the Idris Elba programming language. So I mean, it does say, because I was like, well, what wasn't computing is that like if you're dealing with dynamic data, like how can you evaluate? How can you basically perform that, what they're calling eager evaluation? But it's not everything. It's just there's some types can be specified by the values, if I'm understanding that correctly. It's
basically you can encode that the value into the type so that the type actually depends on the value. But I don't want to get too theoretical here, but have you heard of the Curry-Howard isomorphism?
Oh yeah, man. I'm reading that all. What the? No. No.
Basically, types are a program. Right? They're a logic that you apply. Like types are a programming language. They are a logic that you apply to your program, right?
Right.
So when you have languages like Idris or ATS or anything like that, they don't delineate between term language, which is what you program in, and type language. That delineation is broken down a little bit to allow you to express certain things that were certain constraints that you maybe wouldn't be able to otherwise express. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, and it also follows along with some of what I'm reading right here.
I mean, it's similar. It's sort of an evolution of the difference between static and dynamic typing.
Right. Exactly.
And that's something that always felt natural to me. Like dynamic type languages just make me feel weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not in a good way.
We won't talk about a good
you know,
way afterwards. But
yeah, one of the other things that I've been sort of loosely following, if you follow Jess Fraz on Twitter, like she's pushing for generating SE comp profiles at compile time. And I think, you know, those sorts of things where we can build the security into the language are, you know, just absolutely genius, and we have to get there. Those things will.
Yeah, I mean, anything that helps or that takes away those security flaws as a programmer is working, right? I mean, I think we all see that in our day-to-day jobs is, you know, just the proliferation of frameworks and how they've prevented, or ORMs and how they prevent SQL injection vulnerabilities or injection vulnerabilities. I mean, when I
OWASP top 10.
What?
OWASP top 10.
OWASP top 10.
No.
Wait. We talked about that last week. You guys you're coming late to the game, so. But
no.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
no, I
exactly
mean,
what we're talking about is, right? How do we tell the computer that we're trusted, or how do we tell the compiler that we're trusted, that the code is, and let it determine whether or not we're validating or right? I mean, that's basically what's going on with strongly typed languages, right?
Right. I mean,
building in
that's
protections
what
to
you're
take away the chance of failures and lower the risk. I mean, we've been doing this stuff. I don't even want to say out loud the number of years we've been doing this stuff. And other than a few recent frameworks that are, you know, by default adding CSRF tokens and by default doing encoding and whatnot, you know, we haven't evolved in the past decade. So naturally we need to grow towards this, you know, built-in protections, because developers are coming out of school and they just want to get a job, and businesses just want to put software out. You know, nobody but us nerds cares about, you know, static typing and whatever that crap Stefan was talking about.
Yeah.
Are those I thought I had read, speaking on that note, I thought I had read that those schools that they'd popped up for, like, learn, you know, Ruby or Python or whatever in a couple months, like those little boot camps,
like Iron Yard.
Yeah, are those? I from my understanding, those aren't doing so hot, but maybe I'm wrong.
No,
I don't know. I know a guy in Charleston who went to one and he got a job as a front end developer, and he did really well. But he took it upon himself to really learn it well. So I don't know.
Well, several of them have gone out of business, though, right? Like there was a big consolidation. There was several of them like begging for students, and then they went out of business. I mean, I think it's like anything else. It becomes popular. People replicate the model. There's too many of them. The weaker ones die off, and then, you know, survivorship bias sets in, and then, you know, in a few years we'll have like schools instead of camp, and people will be setting up schools that are like longer term, you know, paid for models, or I don't know, something
where you get like a paper, maybe even a paper or some sort of decree that you know what you're doing. Yeah, weird concept.
You know, I mean, I saw the exact same thing when I was doing network engineering with all the Cisco boot camps. You know, I studied and practiced and paid for way too much Cisco hardware at my house, and went out and got my CCNA on my own. And then later on, when I was working in the DoD, the company SAIC that I was working for was just like, hey, we're going to send you to your CISSP boot camp and 3 SANS courses. And so, I mean, it was within a year and I got 4 certifications.
Dang.
Yeah.
I worked for SAIC. But yeah, they didn't give me any 4 certifications in a year. Get your special.
I maybe Seth is the only person who hasn't worked for SAIC.
SAIC, that's all me. I've been purely commercial, and I'm gonna keep it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was good times, you know, and the group that I was working with, we all got sent, you know, as part of this brand new cyber warrior program that nobody really understood.
Oh, God.
Or still does.
Yeah, or still understands. we had a great time. We got some certs, and in the DoD, that's directly tied to dollars. So we're like, fuck yeah, I'm going. So
yeah,
I'm
well,
still,
yeah, I mean, as far as the like training people to do different things, I always go back to like the heyday of web, 1.0, where everyone was a programmer because they knew HTML, and they would go do an HTML boot camp, and I'm like, really, right? And then Dreamweaver, finally came out with a stable version, and all of those people were like out of a job because you can drag and drop a table from them. Right? I'm like, okay, it's very cyclical, right? Just oh, how quickly can I get up to speed? The ones like your friend that actually go in and dig into it, they're going to be okay either way, wherever they learn that stuff. But you kind of get that swing. Hey, it's popular to be a programmer, right?
Yeah.
But not everybody has the passion for it. And we see that in the industry too, right? It's very, it's very easy to say you want to be a security person, but it's harder to actually back that up and go out and do the things that make you a good, AppSec professional. So.
Wow, we have so many good links. Thanks for sharing this one. Was Stefan. Sorry, he was posting a link to. Okay, well, I screwed up the link.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see how those boot camps come around, disappear with the market. Now, I mean, it sucks if you paid for one of those though, and you didn't really get if there's so many of them, and how reputable they are is always going to be problematic. Like especially if you're not in the industry, it's hard to determine how reputable something you're actually paying money for is.
And not only that, I think they prey on people who don't realize that you can get the exact same knowledge at Barnes and Noble for $40, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said for like Recurse Center and those sorts of places that bring people together. Not only do you get the boot camp experience, but you get to sit down in a room like Seth and I have done, or like you and I have done, Ken or even Coursey and I, to sit down, work with someone, and do something as a project. Like if it's structured well, it could be interesting. If it's just, hey, we're going to learn CSS3 today, and we're going to do selectors, that's book actually have physical facilities,
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I was talking with, one of my friends that he was asking something similar, right? He's like, all right, I've been doing security kind of as a pen tester for the last couple of years. I want to get into coding more. What should I do, right? He's like, I'm going to go do my AWS certifications. I'm like, great, you should do that. He's like, but I want to be a full stack developer, right? That's the new, all right, we got to be full stack devs.
10x.
And I'm like, and he's like, well, I could go take a 6-month course and they're going to teach me all this stuff. And I'm like, really? Right? I mean, there is a place for someone like you that's dedicated and knows what you want to get out of it to go and do a 2-week or a 6-week course rather than spending, getting an associate's degree at a university where they teach you the same thing, but most of that knowledge you already have because you're in the industry, right? So it's, but it's hard to pick out what the good ones are without talking to somebody that's been through those courses. And I mean, he fully recognized that, hey, I can go to Barnes and Noble and pick up a book, but I won't be dedicated enough unless I have someone that's walking me through it, telling me, hey, I've got to finish this assignment by next Wednesday, that sort of stuff. And, it was like, well, you need to go look at these different courses because there's enough of them out there right now that they should be able to train you.
There's a Twitter account that I followed for a little while, but it wasn't really for me, so I ended up unfollowing him. But it's Code Newbies, and so they talk about a lot of the stuff that newer developers are doing. And one of the things that I think they do best is sort of like daily motivations and the 30 days of code and stuff like that, just to keep people going and just get them. If you just sit down and write one line of code today, just go do it. Mm-hmm. And you'll get better over time, and you will be a 10x unicorn.
I like Project Euler. But that's very math focused. But there are all sorts of code kata websites for stuff. The other thing I like to do is, for myself, if I'm picking up a new language, I like to build tools that I've already built in another language and rebuild them in this new language that I'm building. The ones I usually focus on are reading tar files, right?
Uh-oh. Did we lose? What kind of files were those? Reading tar files?
Tar files.
Oh, tar files. Okay. That works. Input, output. Did we lose Ken as well? No, we didn't. He's just
no. I'm just trying to fix these links because
yeah, it looks like they're broken.
they were, but it turns out if you put a little, if you type something, do a colon, and then put in the link, then it's not broken. So
okay.
But if you just put it in the link, then it breaks for whatever reason, or maybe it's because I'm copying from group chat into the. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever.
I learned speaking of links, I learned a neat trick on Twitter today. So like all those URL shorteners like Bitly, if you copy the URL, put it in your address bar, and then put a plus on the end, it'll take you to the analytics of that link, show you how many people clicked on it, little stuff like that.
That could be useful.
Yeah.
That could definitely be useful.
Sweet. So we're talking boot camps, talking new languages. Yeah, Stefan dropped off there, so I'm not sure if we're going to get him back. Hopefully we will here in a minute. I mean, so, like we've always kind of approached the new language thing from a similar perspective, right? At least personally, right? One of the things that I've always done is, hey, here's a new framework or here's a new language. I'm going to go build a web app in it, and then I'm going to see how SQL injection could manifest itself, right? How hard is it to actually, perform or write an XSS vulnerability? We have all those vulnerable apps that we've written to help train over the years. Not only is building it, number one, you learn the language syntax and things like that, but by building in the vulnerabilities, you realize what security functions are built into the language and how they can, or how they're actually used, right?
Yeah, definitely. And Ken knows this. I did this with Go not too long ago, and we use it internally for training, so it's not going to be open source. But building, just like you said, you learn the language in a different perspective. Like some of the things that I was trying specifically to build vulnerabilities in just didn't work without going really out of my way. Like XXE, Golang just is not going to do it. It doesn't work unless you add third-party dependencies to do the DTD parsing, right? So if you're doing that, you can set yourself up for failure. But that and getting cross-site scripting to pop in Chrome, I had to add directives to disable the the XSS protection.
Yeah, and that's pretty common, right? I remember, Ken and I running into like a node problem trying to get NoSQL injection to work with later versions of Mongoose. It's not possible, right? It's like so difficult to actually write an example of that because of the protections that they built into the library that I just, like, it became like it was a nightmare, right?
For what? For what was it?
That's Node, right? Don't you remember when we were playing with NoSQL injection?
Oh, no, that wasn't. That was just because the type was not a. By the way, just real quick, Logical says that he's switching Max because he's having some issues with his other one. So he'll be on in a minute. But no, that turned out to be that just turned out to be an issue where we were actually handling the JSON request at the type for that JSON request as like a
as JSON and not as text or something like that.
The reverse of that. Yeah, it was the reverse. It was like text, and I don't know. It was my fault. I'm not even going to pin that on you. It was my fault.
Gosh, Ken.
Yeah.
But that's exactly the stuff that you run into, and you realize how they've built the security protections because you're trying to exploit them and fix them all at the same time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was really eye-opening, and it was kind of fun, and it's something that I I've thought about building a separate one to kind of open source. One of the big debates in the Golang world and on the like the Gophers Slack is, do you build web interfaces with just a standard library, or do you use something like Buffalo? And you have your war camps that are staunch supporters of either way. And so when I did the one for our internal training, I did it just with the standard library, and it's definitely not as robust, but it's very simple, and the template engine works, and you can get it done. But as a newbie, it definitely took me 10 times longer than it should have, because I was figuring things out, sort of Lego block by block, instead of just plopping down the instructions and putting it all together.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the problems that I've had in the past is, hey, I'm going to build this new language. How much middleware do I actually want to use, or how many frameworks do I want to use on top of Node, right?
Yeah.
Because, all right, we know that everyone uses Node and Express. So yeah, that's a good place to start. But with Django, it's the same thing. Like, how much are we actually going to add to that? To evaluate the security of that framework, because you start to limit your audience for that, right? Because not everybody's using Express, not everybody's using Django with that specific template version, or whatever it is. It becomes it's still interesting to me as someone that's trying to figure out what the security is of this framework or of this language, but it still is. It becomes less useful outside of that.
Welcome back, Stefan.
I had to grab another MacBook because the first one just stopped being able to resolve Google completely. So I'm sitting on...
I'll turn off my rat tool. Sorry.
That's fine. You didn't have to install a rat if you just wanted to see... And never mind.
Did you use Autosploit?
Autosploit, I was running that.
You Autosploited him?
Good Lord.
Well, yeah, not to go back on the Autosploit thing, but did you see that Jerry wrote the Autosploit?
Can't
remember what it was called. Right?
Yeah,
where he just basically, it was about as complex as Autosploit. He just blacklisted all of the Showdown IPs, so no one could find you, right?
It was mainly to be humorous, but then people were like, "Oh, this really helps." I was like,
he said he had 4 interviews around that, right?
Right, exactly. He said he went to bed, he wrote it as a joke, went to bed, and then woke up with it mentioned in a huge number of mainstream publications that people were like, "There's protection out there already."
So good job, Jerry, saving us from ourselves.
Oh, man.
InfoSec is so stupid. It's so dumb.
Oh yeah, that's so funny. He wrote that as a humorous thing, and they took it seriously. I didn't even realize they took it seriously. That's great.
Yep.
Oh wow.
Cool.
I told him I was going to write anti.
You're going to start proxying Showdown IPs.
Yeah.
Directly to whoever's implementing it.
We could theoretically form a little hacking. We need a logo, we need a name, and then we just need or create 2 different groups. They're just opposing each other, going back and forth with 1-line, 2-line pieces of code. War games, cybering.
Yep.
That's actually a thing. It's called Core Wars. It's a game that we all play where we write code against one another. Yeah, you don't have to
We wanted to do that publicly though on GitHub, and release so the media would pick it up. That's what we need.
But Ken, I found the logo, by the way.
Do I want to click on this?
Yeah, you did.
No, I'm not going to put that out there. I'm not going to repost that.
It's a common vegetable. It's a common vegetable.
It's a very vascular common vegetable.
Oh, Lord. What else did we have to? Because I know we had the. Oh yeah, there were. Well, I guess so with the autosploit piece, but not talking about autosploit. Going to the actual issue that someone posted. Where I thought this was like interesting. God, let me see if the link will work.
Yeah, can you post that again, Ken?
Yep. Yeah. I just put GitHub there. All right, here, I'll put in this one too. So basically, and I don't know the reputability of this comment, but in that issue, they say that well, it's saying that the author of the Showdown tool said the craziest thing that ever happened with the Showdown tool was someone that had seen an elderly person being abused by their daughter, and then basically somebody was using Showdown to find webcams. This person found a webcam. The elderly person was being abused by their daughter on the webcam. The person who was searching for webcams had the presence of mind to record it, and then provided to law enforcement, and that was used against or in the trial against that person. I think that's what it said, which was like crazy.
Yep,
if true.
Basically it. I mean, he does call that out. The chances of something like that happening are pretty low, of someone actually seeing that or watching your webcam. But it being exposed like that, it could be recorded somewhere too, right? It's very easy for someone to do that.
Yeah, and I know. Well, and then there's this what is it? Why is it looping? I'm having the hardest time with the internet tonight. Just the regular old internet. It's because I didn't put the link in there. That might be difficult to for us to take a look at. But gosh, never mind. There was an article it was along the lines of using a medical device as evidence. Here we go. I'll put the link in.
A medical device, huh?
using the so basically, what was it? There was a fire, and they suspected arson, and the pacemaker of the person they suspected, the homeowner they suspected of like committing arson against themselves, they used the pacemaker data.
Oh yeah, I remember this.
Yeah, to basically in the trial, it was allowed to be used as data. And one of the interesting points brought up was, okay, so you can do that with a pacemaker, but like, what about cochlear implants or other? There was another implant mentioned. Basically, medical devices. See, not going to stay mature. It's not going to happen.
Well, you know what? I will take this in a funky direction, but I will keep it as mature as possible. But Sarah Jamie Lewis, she does she does a lot on like internet connected adult devices, and it's been really interesting to see the research that she's done on those sorts of like IoT, like where privacy and IoT meet, especially in her area with adult devices and cameras and all sorts of accoutrement that goes along with adult sexual aids that are also Internet of Things devices. And it's really interesting to see the research that she comes up with as to how broken a lot of these devices are that really are your most intimate and private moments that you would have with partner or partners, and it's interesting to see what she pulls out of this sort of stuff in her research all the
time. What do you have a Twitter handle or anything I can link to folks?
Yeah, it's literally, I'll put it in chat right now.
Cool. Awesome.
And her, just to be clear, her Twitter is not safe for work. Like, she did a thing on fingerprinting blowjobs and stuff. I mean, it's really, she's an interesting follow on Twitter if you're in security, because she does a lot of really interesting research. It's just not always safe for work research.
Fair enough. So there's the warning. It's not safe for research. So or I'm reading, and yeah, dude, it's not safe for work. It's probably not safe for research either, but whatever.
Depends on what you're researching.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. I've got the link. Cool.
Yeah, she's a super awesome follow. Really interesting lady who does a lot of interesting stuff. But one of the things that she talks about a lot is privacy and anonymity and those sorts of things as they meet with Internet of Things and whatnot. So
Interesting.
yeah, it's super interesting.
That horse has left the gate and it's not coming back.
Nope.
If anything is connected to anything, somebody is tracking it, and it's not in your best interest.
Yeah, they actually did mention Fitbit 2 separate times in this article. Let's see. One was like, so murder victims, Fitbit was used to determine whether her murder's alibi held up based on the distance she had traveled before her death. And then in another case, a woman's Fitbit was used to determine her general fitness levels. Don't know how like that works, but
well, I mean, you got people that are tracking like their significant others' Apple Watches and their like, you know, heart rates and things like that, right? It could tell quite a bit about, hey, what activities is somebody doing when they're traveling or they're doing something else, right? You know,
Look at
that doesn't come to the level of like court style, right, activities. But at the very, I mean, you could see something like that being introduced in, you know, hey, a divorce proceeding. You know, it's all tracked. You know, somebody has access to it, and a lot of people share it out. I mean, that goes to the what was it, the Strava?
Yeah.
Map data, right? The fact that you could, you know, you were friends with somebody that's in the military and all of a sudden you see the routes that they're running in Afghanistan somewhere, right? Or in a sensitive location.
Or worse, yeah.
Well, so I have to ask this, and I'm not going to ask you to disclose the location, but who amongst us actually looked at a location that they used to work at and to see if that location was on the Strava maps? Because I know I did, and the 2 locations that I was mainly working at were both like, you saw the red track, the red outline on there. It was
I went and looked at one, and apparently either nobody runs there or they had some way of blocking it because it was devoid of all red lines.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, you know, in the U.S., right, depending on where you're at, there's so many people and there's so much data that's out there. It's not as telling, definitely. But
yeah.
Anyway, well, guys, we're at. Oh, did we lose Ken? We're at an hour and 15 minutes. Let's kind of get some closing thoughts. If Ken actually can join back up, he probably will.
We can't close the podcast. It's
unless Ken.
Yeah, I'm back. No, I was trying to. Okay, so I clicked on one of the things for the Strava thing for the to read up a little bit more on the Strava thing, and then it started video, and I hit Command W, but I was in the wrong. Yeah, I closed Google Hangout. Whatever. I'm an idiot. That's the TLDR.
You're not an idiot, Ken.
No GitHub. No GitHub hoodie.
Yeah, that's right. Where's your GitHub hoodie? Well, yeah, I mean, I was just saying we're at about an hour and 15 minutes, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. I just wanted to get some closing thoughts from these guys, you know, both on just AppSec in general or, you know, any closing thoughts on what we talked about today. So, hey, Stefan, we'll start with you.
Why? Because I'm the more long-winded of the two, and you want me to shut the fuck up earlier?
yeah, exactly. Just shut up already and let David talk. No, go ahead, man.
I mean, everyone knows me. I think with newer languages, we can finally get to the point where we have those sorts of formal specifications, those sorts of, or even semi-formal specifications that we can actually verify, extract code from, and really understand finally what we're doing. Doesn't really matter the language that you're looking at or whatnot. Like, I think we're heading in the direction where proofs of correctness and understanding what your application is actually doing is going to be where most research is focused, if not most actual AppSec programs. Eventually, AppSec programs will get there. It's just that research is really leading the way currently. It kind of seesaws, right? You have industry generating a lot of stuff, and then that kind of dies away, and then research picks up the pace a little bit, and then it dies away. And it's a good back and forth. And I think right now research is leading the way with better languages, and you see companies like Galois or like a lot of quant firms and whatnot are using these more advanced languages and more advanced tooling, more advanced compilers, and they'll get. I'm waiting for Coursey to fall asleep on me.
No, I was just about to refute you that I know a HFT firm that does all of their most critical code in Bash.
I'm not surprised by that at all. Are there quants doing it in Bash, or are there?
Fuck if I know.
I mean, a lot of them are using Haskell, right? But for every single one that's using a quant,
is that little fruit that's like an orange, but
that's a quint. That's a quint. I think for every firm that you see that is using something like Haskell or OCaml or A+ or any of those sorts of languages, you'll see 5 that are using C and Bash and Tickle and all those weird old languages. But I think at the end of the day, people are moving towards being able to prove things and being able to understand things about their applications and their networks, right? We have SDN. Now people want to know that they can prove that their network operates in the way that they expected it to. So I think we'll see more of that, more of like Microsoft's Project Everest and those sorts of things moving forward. So that's my long-winded.
Nice. No. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. We're moving in the right direction, but on the commercial side, as far as like code that I review, we don't see a lot of that yet. But it'll come. It does. It'll come because there's a need for it. So,
well, it's like JML. Remember JML?
Yeah.
And how many assessments have you been on with JML? Because I know for me, it's been like 2.
Yeah.
In my entire career in government, it was like 2 assessments. So
it never took off. So
yeah, it's just not there yet. So it'll be interesting to see where we go.
Oh, definitely. Dave, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, we talk to a lot of developers in the jobs that we do, and it's very rare that you come across any of these people that just don't care about security. Usually they're kind of interested and they want to write good code and they want to do a good job and they want it to be secure, but they've got so many other pressures and so many other priorities that they can't get to those defects. And until there is some sort of feedback loop with the businesses, like Equifax that gets hacked, all these huge companies that get major breaches and lose millions upon millions of records, until there's some feedback and they feel some pain from that, it's never going to get any better. And we as InfoSec practitioners are stuck in this place where we're, feeling undervalued and feeling hated. And it can be really demoralizing when most of us just want to help and make things better for everybody.
Yeah. And I haven't, I mean, in my career, I haven't run into a lot of people. Oh, well, no, I haven't run into anybody that's been like, hey, we just don't want to secure things, right? It's usually we're choosing something else instead of security.
Right.
And that's kind of the discussion.
Stefan and I have dealt with the guy.
Them, right? Yeah. Until it costs a commercial company, they're not going to care. So.
Right.
Yeah. Stefan and I have dealt with a guy on this one customer that, he just doesn't agree with anything we say. We're like, look, you got this vulnerability right here and I can do this right now for you. And he's like, no, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Fake vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, yeah, we appreciate you guys coming on. We'll have to do it again because.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, I wore my Bug Crowd shirt after you guys had the.
Oh, nice. After we had our big Bug Crowd discussions.
Yeah.
I would actually love to get. Maybe I'll reach out to like Jason Haddix.
Yeah, reach out to him.
Get him. Come again?
He'd be an interesting one to talk to.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, he's got some really good insight, statistics. He talks about all the time some like what's successful when bug hunting, how to be successful with that, and all that. So that's pretty interesting stuff. But by the way, this was a lot of fun, and I want to do it again. This was a good time, guys. Like, thanks for coming on. This was, we always say this before the show. We're always like, this whole like hour time slot we try to at least meet. It just goes, and tonight was no different. It just went by, just flew by.
Cool.
Yeah, same here. I'm always around if you ever need comic relief.
Sweet. All right.
For sure.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.